Hey everyone, good morning from Bellevue, Washington. Thank you so much for zooming in today for our virtual meetup, Lessons Learned from Real World PLG Experiments. I'm really excited to be hosting this for you today. My name is Sid, and I'm a product marketing manager at Statsig. And I've been in a unique position where I get to liaise with product leaders from a range of companies in both B2B and B2C spaces. And over the past few months, having engaged with our customers and documented their success stories in the form of case studies, I started to notice certain common themes for success and general tips and tricks that I'd like to share in today's meetup. So I really appreciate you joining in today. We're just having a few more people join in on the Zoom. So we will get started within the next minute. So in the meantime, I want to quickly go over what you can expect in today's virtual meetup. Like I said, I want to talk through some common themes and success factors amongst different companies that built an experimentation program from the ground up. The goal would be that you get some ideas on where you can experiment on, do some benchmarking, look at what you are doing today and get some ideas on what you want to do going into 2024. And really, I want to talk through certain real world examples, right? I want to cover a couple of case studies that we wrote, and we'll share some of these on the chat over the course of the session. And the goal is that you get at least one or two practical takeaways that you can take back to your organization and use it to inform your growth and experimentation strategy, right? So it's going to be a lot of real world examples. Do engage with us on the chat. Our head of marketing, Elizabeth, EG, is on the live chat. So she'll be sharing a lot of resources through the session. So keep your questions coming on the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them in real time or at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, we're doing this today because successful product-led growth, which is something that a lot of companies want to achieve, hinges on successful experimentation, right? So when you say product-led growth, we're really talking about using your product as the primary driver for acquisition, engagement, and retention. And in order for that to come to fruition, you need to make sure you have a culture of continuous improvement, continuous innovation, being data-driven, and taking calculated risks. And experimentation enables you to do that, right? So that's the context. And over the past few months, as I've spoken with more product leaders from different companies who have built an experimentation program from 0 to 1, I noticed that there were three key themes for success that were almost always true in all of these cases. The first has to do with culture. The second has to do with the experimentation velocity. And the third has to do with using experimentation as a way to learn more about your users. So let's go over each of these. Well, the first, when we say culture, right, they say culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I really like this cartoon, so much so that our team actually bought the rights to own this cartoon and share this. And you can see here, it's the idea of a hippo, or the highest paid person's opinion. And if this culture exists where senior leadership decides to make product decisions, not really looking too much into data, it's going to be really hard to make a case for experimentation. So among successful companies, we noticed that there's a very strong buy-in from leadership. Leadership agrees that we should make decisions based on data. There are no preconceived notions, no hippo, and they're very customer-centric in terms of looking at what the users want, how they respond to new features, and using that to inform product development and iterations. There's also a lot of cross-functional support, because experimentation and PLG cannot just be a one-team job. You really need to make sure that this is something that various cross-functional teams have the visibility into and are aligned and part of the program. And then at the same time, we noticed that in fact, a lot of our early customers were former executives at large companies like Facebook or Airbnb or Amazon and the like, and they went on to become head of product or directors at like relatively smaller companies, and they wanted to bring that same data-driven culture that they were used to in the larger companies to their new organizations. And so, in fact, that's how at Statsig, some of our early customers some years ago were these ex-FANG leaders who were looking to use the same tooling and bring that data-driven culture of experimentation to their new organizations, which kind of made me realize that you need someone who can be a champion to bring about this change. Right. So if in your organization, this is still something that you are not yet fully ramped up on, maybe you can be the person who brings about this change by evangelizing what experimentation can do for PLG. And finally, there's also, it's important to have a strong understanding of the business value and the ROI for experimentation. And in successful companies that have done PLG, there's a pretty good understanding from leadership who are often involved in actually pushing forward this culture of experimentation. And they've in fact used experimentation, tied it up with business goals so that when they're thinking about, we want to increase our retention rate by a certain percentage, they directly look at experimentation as a way to achieve that. And I think it's also important to have a long-term outlook where you're not viewing experimentation as, we ran 1 or 2 tests and then we won, we had a winning feature and now it's a success. But rather, this is something that good companies that have done this have realized that this is something we need to do for several months and years in order to have success. And that brings me to experimentation velocity. For the companies that have that hadn't yet implemented an experimentation program, these were some of the main pain points that we saw, right? They run very few experiments per quarter, maybe just a single-digit number of experiments. There are a lot of delays and bottlenecks in analysis, a lot of manual work involved in actually, analyzing the results and then showcasing those results to cross-functional teams. So very limited visibility, limited feedback loops, and really not getting enough out of doing these experiments. So it's never the case that a company does not run experiments, but it's just that they're not really measuring impact properly. And as a result, there's very little benefit or tangible benefit that they get. Oftentimes, there's also concerns around reliability. So we see companies say, we ran an experiment, but a certain KPI improved by 3 or 4%, but there isn't enough trust in their systems that other teams agree that they actually impacted core metrics the way they said they did. There's inadequate logging and ingestion of exposure events. So companies struggle to actually track specific events and have them all stored in a centralized location for analysis. And on that note, not having a single source of truth, having data silos, and not all metrics even being available. And as they think about, let's try to build this up, they realize that we don't have the resources to actually build this in-house, scale our internal tooling, and maintain this infrastructure for running experiments at scale. And that causes a lot of misses, where maybe a feature was launched and then they realized that, some data for the first couple of days was not available or got corrupted. There are frustrations in engineering teams and product teams, and overall just slower release cycles, right? So I'm highlighting some of these themes because this could help you think about, like, is this closer to where your organization is right now? Or are you closer to the after case? And this would be after a company went through a transformation, invested in the right tooling, used tools like Statsig, went about changing their culture to running more experiments. And at that point, they get to 10 to 30x increase in experimentation velocity, which means that they now, from running single-digit number of experiments per quarter, they may be running hundreds. They're also concurrently running these experiments, which means they have created layers which are logical representations of their users and are able to run several experiments in parallel. They have a lot of self-service, and I think this becomes a game changer for scaling experimentation, because you want to have democratized access to all your data and also to experiment results, so that every single team, be it in product or growth or biz ops, data science, engineering, all have visibility into experiment results and trust that. And as a result, these companies are able to empower their engineers with a lot more autonomy to go about building new features, testing new ideas, and making decisions, because there's an overall trust within the organization that decisions are being made based on experiment results. And so if something was shipped, they know that this actually impacted core metrics positively. And then we have regular tracking of progress, right? So once companies have gone through this experimentation transformation, they're going towards their top level goals in a very methodic and rigorous way. So they may use things like holdouts to create a global control group in order to measure the aggregate impact of their experiments on core business metrics like activation or retention. And finally, I think the biggest change is that these organizations are now able to focus on creative ideas rather than fixing operational issues, right? In the before case, a lot of time got wasted in trying to get data from various siloed tools. A lot of time got wasted in validating data, bottlenecks waiting on a team, and really just not enough trust in whether they were even making informed decisions based on reliable data. But now they're able to instead not worry about all the heavy lifting of running an experiment, but instead focus more on running several experiments. And that brings me to the third aspect, which is using experimentation for learning. We recently published a case study with the Los Angeles-based global online fashion brand Cider, and their CTO and co-founder Tony said this quote, which was very profound in terms of how you should think about experimentation. And so he said that experimentation serves as the gateway to gaining a deeper understanding of our customers. So at Cider and many other successful PLG companies, experimentation isn't seen as, oh, we're doing this to grow by 5%, or we're doing this to grow by 10%, but it's really deep in the culture of how the company goes about learning about their customers to make informed decisions. So when you're running a high volume of experiments with a high velocity, it means you're going to learn faster, you're going to learn more about your users and get a diverse range of insights through the different experiments that you do. It also lets you do incremental iterations, which means that you're continuously learning and improving your product and incrementally driving towards those top level goals, right? So it's almost like you do experimentation and learning and the results automatically follow. So we noticed that successful companies like Cider also focus a lot on describing their experiment, right? So when they're using a tool like Statsig, they go into the tool and make sure that for every single experiment that they run, there is a clear description and hypothesis for what they're going to test and what are the metrics that they're going to track, both primary and secondary metrics, in order to run that experiment, right? So these companies care so much about the learning that they make sure that they take that extra step to document exactly why they're running a specific experiment. And it often ties to some important learning goal. And then they evangelize these learnings with regular readouts, often like weekly readouts to cross-functional teams. And that way, every week, there are new insights about their users, new insights about how the market is evolving, and they're also tracking progress towards some of their top level goals, right? So the reason I wanted to start this webinar by talking about these three aspects was because this was so evident in every single success story that I came across, that I feel it's really important to benchmark your organization to see whether the culture, velocity, and learning is happening at the level that you want. And so with that in mind, I want to jump into a couple of case studies that we recently published, starting with Lime. And Lime, as you probably know, is one of the fastest growing consumer apps out there. And they've been a customer of Statsig for a while now. And since their founding, I think in 2017, they've really revolutionized how sustainable shared mobility works, and really disrupted this space in the ride-sharing market. So they were acquiring a lot of users over 2018, 2019, and their growth team wanted to focus more on building a recurring business. So they had a lot of users, and they wanted to make sure that these new users who they were acquiring were actually sticking on to the platform, using the app often, and really creating long-term retention and lifetime value. So I spoke with Omar, who is one of their engineering leaders, and I think he really captures what their goal was when they started to scale their experimentation program. He says that they wanted to go beyond just looking at capturing the interest of transient users. So I remember a couple of years ago when I was traveling, or was it maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was traveling a lot for my job, I would come across these Lime bikes at like various touristy locations. And I would notice that myself and a lot of my colleagues would be intrigued by this new thing that was on the streets. And we wanted to try try taking a ride on these bikes. And I think Lime quickly identified that there were a lot of people who were trying the app and trying their bikes out of curiosity, but they wanted to make sure that these users actually kept coming back because they had a good experience. So Lime was a company that always had a strong culture of experimentation, but there were certain pain points that they faced that made it difficult for them to scale their ambitions. Right, so they had some in-house tooling, but Omar pointed out that there was just too much manual work, and they were simply not able to run the level of experiments that they wanted to, in terms of both volume and velocity. Right, so you can kind of tie this back to what we were speaking about at the beginning about what life looks like before a transformation in terms of the experimentation culture. And Lime was sort of in this spot when they began evaluating tools in the market. Specifically, they highlighted 3 main problems, starting with no self-service, which basically meant that data was kind of hoarded within a few teams, and there was a lot of dependencies on continuously tracking results from an experiment, and also giving that visibility that we spoke about to cross-functional teams. A lot of manual work, as you can imagine, and also just a lot of data silos and limited trust, right? So Omar pointed out that they, even if they ran an experiment, there were some doubts amongst certain teams whether those experiments were actually reliable. Were they properly randomized? Is it statistically significant? And these kind of just halted investments in scaling the program. So they went about this change. They realized that these were the problems that they wanted to overcome, and they went about this change, which is when they started speaking with Statsig, and they went on to use our platform. And I want to talk about what happened after the transformation. Right. So Omar said that they had a few key goals that they wanted to achieve, and they had a pretty rigorous process of working backwards from their main goals to define KPIs and then build features that were aligned with those KPIs, right? So he pointed out a few key goals. Some of these you can might be very relevant to your own business, like increasing usage or improving retention. And there are also certain bespoke KPIs that were important to Lime, right? Like they wanted to optimize on the trips taken per vehicle, right? So because in a way they're kind of like a marketplace, I guess, where they have, bikes, but they also and they have users, and they want to make sure that their bikes are also getting utilized to the maximum capacity, right? So, and they had a few requirements that they wanted to reduce the number of canceled trips. They wanted to enhance user experience. And Omar said that, for each of these metrics, they ran experiments to ensure that the features that they built were aligned with these goals. And every single feature that they were looking to ship, they were putting it behind a feature flag. They were rolling it out incrementally. They were monitoring the impact of these features on their core metrics. And they were continuously tracking this progress. So you may rightly wonder, like, the goals seem pretty broad, and they also seem, across the entire customer journey. So how did they really decide on where to focus their efforts, at least at the initial stages? So they did a great deal of user research and looked at their data and found that there were some low-hanging fruit, especially with the new rider experience, which is to say that when a new user is trying out the app for the first time, they tend to struggle to use the app because maybe this is an entirely new concept and idea to them. And as a result, they were struggling to, start their first ride and actually, reach their destination. And so they would end up canceling the ride and requesting for a refund and probably not coming back. So they realized that this was an area that they should focus on, wherein, okay, once users have a successful first ride, they're probably going to love the service and keep coming back. But there might be some gaps in the experience that was preventing users from successfully starting and completing their ride. And so this was a low-hanging fruit where Lime decided to aggressively focus on, started running experiments at this point of drop-off, and started seeing a lot of wins early on that validated their hypotheses that this was in fact the area to focus on, right? So they, in building a winning first-time user experience, they used well-established tactics like user education, giving new users a very comprehensive how to take your first trip video tutorial. And this decreased refunds by 20%, right? Because users were seeing this tutorial, being able to start their ride without issue, and were not requesting refunds. So just think about the ROI right here. And at the same time, they also realized that they did a lot of interesting, simple yet impactful things like adding a GIF to show users how to kick the scooter stand to start their ride. And they saw a 5% reduction in canceled trips right there. So you can see how it's those first few seconds really of the user experience in the case of Lime, where the user needs to cross the chasm from being someone who is just intrigued by this scooter to actually having that moment where they realize like, wow, this works, and I'm ready to start my ride and get to my destination. And so Lime, realizing that this was, low-hanging fruit where they should, capitalize on, allowed them to build a lot of cool features and run experiments to validate those features, and they saw great results there. And that brings me to an important question that people often ask. In fact, one of our attendees, Dai Ho, had dropped a question asking during the webinar registration, asking if they should make small or big changes to improve their product. And I think it's good to have a balance between both, wherein you're using several small changes to take low risk bets and maximize learning and look at a more iterative approach to driving towards a goal, while at the same time you are taking a few big bets which may be more transformational. And with the Lime example, they did a lot of small things in the onboarding flow that were super impactful, because it was many little things that added up to give them tangible ROI. But they also tested out more ambitious features, such as using augmented reality to assist with parking of the vehicle upon completion of ride. Or they tried new subscription plans like Lime Prime, which was going to give sell a bundle of rides for a discounted rate. Or they were trying features like group ride, which allowed a group of friends to unlock multiple bikes and ride together as a group. So you can see how even in this case, Lime was doing a lot of small feature enhancements that optimized on their metrics. But at the same time, they were also using those small wins to gain momentum and try out more ambitious ideas. And so just want to quickly summarize with a few lessons from Lime. Just coming back to identifying the drop-off point can open doors to a range of possibilities for experimentation to drive growth. And that even simple features, when introduced at the right moment, in the case of Lime, it was that onboarding flow and specifically the new user experience. And once you know that that's the source of drop-off, then you can see how easy it would be to start creatively solving for that and testing out multiple ideas, right? So Lime clearly had very clear goals and made sure that they conducted experiments that aligned with these goals. And I think one more key point that was really salient in my conversation with them was that they deeply empathized with their users, right? So they weren't just looking at growth metrics or all these engagement and retention KPI scorecards, but instead they were also deeply thinking about what that experience was like for a new user on the ground. They kind of combined that qualitative insight and that deep care for customers with data in order to build a winning product. So I think that's important to understand, that customers don't really care about your aha moment KPI. Like they probably don't even know that you're tracking these things, but instead what they really care about is realizing value, right? So I think the Lime example really shows that you need to rely on your data, but you also need to know what ultimately matters, which is helping your users achieve success. And I think you can see this in a lot of B2B examples, specifically, companies like Auth0, which is now acquired by Okta, does a great job in their onboarding flow, wherein they give a bunch of predefined one-click, low-effort wins to their new user, so that someone who's trying the product is able to quickly achieve some success and progress in the customer journey, right? So you can see that they have in this screenshot a bunch of different ways by which someone can use their product right after signing up. And you can see how you can experiment on so many different things, right from the order of these boxes, the text and messaging. You can experiment on providing sample data to see whether that makes it easier for the users to at least test your product, for example. So similarly, even companies like Canva do a great job, I think. I'm someone who doesn't design things very well, but when I used Canva for the first time, it allowed me to have a small win unexpectedly within the first few minutes of using the product. So Canva as well, as soon as you sign up, they say, what will you design today? They give you a bunch of templates. You can very easily click on making a presentation or a video, and you can achieve that win very quickly. And again, you can see how there's just so much you can do on just this one little screenshot for experimentation. You could think about experimenting on the search bar. You could think about experiment on the messaging. You could think about experimenting on what are the predefined templates you want to show, right? So I just want to call this out because I know the Lime example was obviously a consumer-facing company, but it's really important to but experimentation can be really important even in the context of B2B SaaS, right? So some general principles that hold good are make it easy to try the product, personalize based on the context, which could be the channel or persona or the geography of the customer, provide clear guidance to them during their new user experience, and make it easy for them to realize value, right? And you can experiment on a bunch of different things in that workflow. Reduce friction, try tooltips, try quick starts, try different pricing plans, messaging, and so on. And you can hopefully appreciate how experimentation can help you find out what truly works. Want to also spend a couple of minutes touching on another case study that we published just last week, actually. And this was with the Los Angeles-based global online fashion brand Cider. And I touched upon the quote from their CTO on how they use experimentation to learn about their users. And I think this was especially important for them because they cater to a pretty big global Gen Z audience. And there can be challenges in learning about what the preferences for a new generation is, especially when you are available in over 160 countries in 9 different languages. And you really need to make sure that you are resonating with your users, right? So very early on, Cider was founded actually in 2020. And very early on, their CTO realized that they didn't want to have too many debates about every single product decision, but they wanted to instead give the autonomy to their product and engineering teams to build fast, move fast, test different ideas, learn from their users, and impact core metrics, right? So this is, I think, a good case study because it shows that you don't need to be a very mature, old organization that's been around for maybe 5-10 years to start your experimentation program, but you can really be doing this from the get-go and have tremendous success, right? So having been founded in just 2020, they've already expanded to over 160 countries and have more than 20 million downloads. And they actually started this PLG and experimentation culture right from the get-go. And you can see the slide points out some key results that they had from experimentation, increasing their new user registrations and also their gross merchandise value. So a few important lessons that you can see from the Cider case study, which I strongly recommend reading on our website, is that they did a great job in reducing the friction to purchase their products. So they experimented heavily in making the checkout experience seamless, trying several simple yet effective ideas like helping users with a one-time code sent to their email to bypass account creation so that they could check out and buy products on the app faster. They focus a lot on refining recommendations, and this is obviously super important in most e-commerce businesses. And they tried various algorithms at the back end and found a balance between upselling their users, but also making sure that the experience was delightful and did not see too much churn from fatigue of pushing recommendations. They also did a lot of localization. Like I said, they're available in over 160 countries across the globe, and they knew that there was no way they could just know beforehand what are some cultural preferences in a given country like Germany or Spain, or what are some regional idiosyncrasies in the form of, say, payment methods in a given country, but instead used experimentation to go in with an open mind, learn about their users, and build amazing experiences that helped their business, but also delighted their regional users. And Tony also pointed out that they often realized that a lot of features that they thought would work were in fact neutral or negatively impacting core metrics. So they were able to quickly kill these features and keep their UI interface with a clean and minimal look, right? So I think these are some important lessons, because oftentimes we don't realize that some features simply don't move the needle, and maybe you can take the decision to go for a more cleaner look on your UI rather than stuffing it with many features. I think he pointed out this example where they were trying to show the difference in the delivery speeds between their various providers, and they thought that maybe that would increase click-throughs, but it was not really making a difference, is what they learned. And so they just decided to remove that extra text to have a cleaner look. So not going to spend too much time on these individual lessons, but I think I would strongly recommend reading this case study on our website. And I think really the key takeaway for me from Cider was that if you start early, you can gain from the compounding effects over time, right? So they used experimentations as they entered new markets. They started tailoring their experiences and localizing their experience to resonate with different cultures. They did not think about just short-term wins. A lot of times we have the tendency of just pushing messaging and push notifications just to get a few clicks. But Cider really looked at creating long-term retention, making sure that users had a good experience on the app and didn't get fatigued. And they also realized that not all experiments have to win. And so long as you learn and document your learnings, it's still a win in terms of knowing this new insight about your users. And as we get to the final few slides of this webinar, you may be thinking at this point, what do I experiment on? Right? We've seen some good examples from Lime and Cider, but I think if you are thinking about kickstarting an experimentation program within your organization, and thinking about how do I go about doing this, I think you can break it down into 3 main steps. The first would be to map your customer journey. As you saw with the case of Lime, they did a pretty good job of knowing exactly where to focus on and prioritize their initial efforts. And knowing that can help you have a few early wins to gain more confidence, both for your own team, but also other teams would see this and want to get on board, right? So map the stages of your user journey, use analytics to go deep into each part of that funnel and identify the points of drop-off. Assess your current strategy to see what are the engagement programs you have in place for each part of that customer journey. And then finally, identify these gaps and prioritize where you want to experiment on, right? So I made an sort of ugly yet hopefully insightful journey map of a typical subscription service or SaaS business, and just putting this on the screen to just show you like what my thought process was, where I looked at different stages for a typical B2B SaaS journey, from discovery, research, trial, onboarding, sustained use, deeper engagement, advocacy, and renewal, and looked at what might be some KPIs that are important for each of these stages and what could be ideas to experiment on, right? So this is obviously a very general template, but feel free to, take this framework and design something similar for your own business to know exactly what the key stages of the customer journey are, what would it take to move a customer from one stage to the next, and what are some important KPIs for each stage in this journey, and look at, where can you experiment on, right? So I kind of put this out there to say, hey, these are all the possibilities or some of the possibilities of what you could be doing. So hopefully this gives you some idea on, how to think about experimentation for your organization, and some ideas on maybe what you aren't yet doing today that you can try out in the coming weeks. And On that note, I know we've spoken a lot about monitoring data, running experiments, being data-driven. I have to call out that while closely monitoring your core metrics is important, I think it's equally important to not lose sight of your product sense and intuition. Having that deep customer-centric mindset and empathy for your users, and really look at delighting your users beyond just, goaling towards these metrics. And what I mean by that is use your experimentation and analytics to make very well-informed decisions, but don't forget what truly matters, which is, delighting your users and achieving success by helping them realize value. And I think my final example for today is the Netflix skip intro button. And they wrote about this in one of their blogs. And I think this is a great example that nicely ties up everything that we've discussed, but also reminding us on what really matters when building a great PLG motion, which is user delight. So I will the link is available in my deck, and you can find this article on their website, and I highly recommend checking it out. But essentially what happened was Netflix's user research team found that a good percentage of their users, about 15%, were manually advancing the video when watching a TV series within the first 5 minutes. And going deep and investigating why this was happening, they realized that people were essentially skipping the introduction. And they thought about, should we, create a general purpose solution of just letting people skip by 10 seconds so they can just click it a few times and get through the introduction. But then they realized that there might be cases where users love the intro theme and might want to watch it again. So they instead came up with a one-click solution that if you've used Netflix, or I think most video streaming platforms have, copied this idea right now. So you've probably seen the skip intro button on whichever streaming service that you use. And they came up with this one-click solution, added it for a few series, about 250 TV shows, tried it only for web and for a few countries to begin with, and realized that it had tremendous impact, and rolled it out in 2017 to all users across the globe for all TV shows. And since then, it's been pressed 136 million times. There are tweets like this one that say, "Whoever invented this button deserves the highest accolade we as a society can bestow upon a citizen," and it still wouldn't be enough. And someone else, an engineer on their team, said that even if you put a button that said free cupcake, it wouldn't get more clicks than skip intro. So I think it's really important to have this example in mind, just because sometimes you might get too caught up with scorecards and gamification of KPIs that we forget what truly matters. And my final note is that you don't always have to win, so long as you don't lose, right? So we often think that our features all our features that we roll out are having a positive impact on our users and our core business metrics. But enough research has shown that, in fact, a third of features probably are neutral, and a third of features, in fact, negatively impact core metrics. So this graph kind of highlights what the difference would be between you shipping features that positively impact core metrics versus negatively impacting core metrics, and how it compounds over time. So think about these ideas, use these tips to evangelize experimentation within your organization. Use these pointers, examples, to make a case for this within your company. Know that it starts small and usually needs a change agent to advocate for, for this change. But once you pick up the momentum, it rapidly spreads across the organization. And within a few months, you'd be surprised what you can do, going from running a few experiments per quarter to 10x or 30xing that velocity. So on that note, thank you so much for tuning in for today's session. I think we've answered most of the questions on the chat. I see a couple of pending questions that I can spend a couple of minutes answering. But if you have any more questions, feel free to write to me at sid@statsig.com, and I'll be more than happy to engage with you via email. Someone wanted to know if the deck will be shared over the call. We will be sharing the video to everyone who registered. But if you want the deck, maybe just drop me an email and I should be able to, export this as a PDF and send it to you. I think one more interesting question that I have is from one of our attendees is, how important is creating and rolling out the experiment without any engineering effort? For example, an experiment on the UI requires code changes in the UI layer, incorporating the feature flag in code. Is there a better way to go about this, like without any engineering effort every time an experiment needs to be rolled out? And do big companies like Amazon and Facebook have this built into their in-house platforms? I think that's a great question. I think this really touches upon tooling and why we built Statsig, which was really to democratize experimentation to companies of all sizes. Companies like Amazon and Facebook have really sophisticated internal tools that they use so that they're able to decouple their code from their feature releases and then simply turn on and off feature flags so that a specific feature is exposed to the required audience. And using a tool like Statsig, you'll be able to do that in just a few clicks. So yes, the answer is there is certainly a better way to go about this. You don't need to make code changes and engineering effort every time a new experiment is launched, but instead by using the Statsig SDK, you can get control over your code and feature releases from the Statsig UI, which makes it a lot more easier to be shipping more features and shipping these features faster. And I think it's honestly very fundamental to achieving that scale of experimentation. Yeah, happy to chat more about this. Do write to me at sid@statsig.com. But other than that, I think we've answered all the other questions that came up. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found this session helpful. I know I had a lot of fun putting this together because it gave me the chance to reflect on some of my own conversations with various product leaders and sort of compile some of my learnings and general themes that I came across. So thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day, and bye for now.